crazy.
Austin Eruption. I love this guy. I love this motherfucker.
Video games, on the other hand, are a minefield of legal IP nonsense over characters that have been thrown around for the better part of 30 years. 30 years of people acquiring Bubsy. This is capitalism.
Were you expecting someone else?
This is the second time we're doing this, and well, I have something to address. I was wrong.
Good games stuck on old consoles? Para mim, o melhor Zelda está stuck na 3DS. Fuck. Chama-se Link Between Worlds.
That video is wrong. About
stuck.
half of those games are no longer stuck on older consoles. Rocket Knight Adventures, Golden Sun, Baten Kaitos, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, heck, even Jeanne d'Arc on the PSP. We've even got Shadows of the Damned on the horizon. I failed. So we're gonna do it again. Round 2. More good video games.
Link Between Worlds. Queria tanto. Mas depois estava stuck.
Stuck on older consoles because I'd really like to play Mech Assault 2 Lone Wolf again without hooking up my Xbox 360. I don't even know if it'll turn on. Might be too dusty. So yo, it's Austin, and today we're gonna be trying this again. I, like many of y'all, have been playing video games for several decades, and some of the older stuff is kind of hard to get going today. You either have to hook up an old console or tinker around on the tricky World Wide Web, which I'm learning that the newer generation is having a harder time pulling that off. That, and no one should be required to pull out a dusty Wii U just to play Twilight Princess HD. Seriously, why is that stuck? Nintendo, we'll come back to you, but before we get started, I got a word from today's sponsor, Ray Neo. This here is the Ray Neo Air 2S, and these are smart AR glasses that can be used to watch television or play video games on a giant screen.
What a stupid product. Quer dizer, não é stupid, mas... Um bocado stupid.
Anytime, anywhere. Hook it up to your phone, a tablet, a Steam Deck with a USB-C cable, or even a Nintendo Switch with a Joy Dock and get to playing on a massive screen inside the glasses. These are sporting 120 Hz, 1080p resolution. It's gonna look like a 201-inch screen.
Opa, estou dividido entre ser estúpido e não ser estúpido. Porque a pessoa parece estúpida, mas ao mesmo tempo consegue estar na sala com os teus pais e a jogar na mesma. Isto de perspectiva se fores miúdo.
Screen on the inside is big. If you've ever wanted to see what your games look like really close up, the Ray Neo Air 2S is a great way to do it. I think the glasses fit nicely and they're adjustable so they'll fit on all sorts of face shapes. They're light, I think they fit well, and the sound coming out of these things is actually pretty good. I was surprised. There's two screens you're gonna be looking at, one inside each of the lenses, but when you put them together, it feels like you're looking at a giant immersive screen. Look, sometimes you just wanna kick back and fully plant yourself inside of whatever video game you're playing or TV show you're watching, and the Ray Neo Air 2Ss are a great way to do it. Just make sure to let your roommates and family know while you're sitting alone on the couch with your sunglasses on. Oh, no, I'm gaming. So, if you want to pick up the Ray Neo Air 2S, the pair that hit Amazon US's #1 bestseller in smart glasses, click the link down.
Mano, imagina estás assim no shopping. A única coisa que queres fazer é uma sessãozita de... não, pegas no Steam Deck e jogas... Age of Empires, Baldur's Gate 3, e estás tipo na zona da restauração, o pessoal com Happy Meals e não sei o que, tu estás tipo com só sol também.
In the description. Thanks to Ray Neo for sponsoring today's video, but for now, we need to hop back from the future. Old games, old consoles, even some really old publishers. No one quite gatekeeps their old software quite like Nintendo. I am so glad that the Disney-style Nintendo Vault seems to have stopped being a thing. There was a little while there where Nintendo had released a few games for a limited amount of time for, in my opinion, no real reason, and then they quickly stopped. But have since resorted to games being Nintendo Switch Online exclusive, which isn't that much better. Previously, we had talked about Golden Sun, and yeah, Golden Sun being back is sick, but also, I just want to give y'all like $5 or $10 and be done with it. Granted, it's dope that both Super Mario RPG and Thousand Year Door got full-on remakes and remasters on the Switch. Sure, they're a full $60, but still, it beats trying to plug in a GameCube and failing to find a composite video slot on the back of a TV.
Where is it? Where is it? it.
Nintendo's getting a little better about the whole preservation of video games deal, but they still got a ways to go. Point in case, the whole deactivation of several digital game stores. 3DS and
that's
Wii
pretty
U,
stupid.
barely knew ya. I assume it'll happen to the Switch one day, but for now it pains me that they've left behind so many cool classics. I'm just saying, if The Last of Us can get a remake and remaster 3 consoles in a row, I should be able to play custom Robo on something made in the last 20 years. F-Zero GX, Rogue Squadron, Extreme G, Ever Oasis. There's plenty of old games on Nintendo consoles and portables I'd love to see playable on the Switch, or Switch 2, but only one of those is a remake so good it deserves a second port. Punch-Out for the Wii.
Yeah. Este é o que dói mais. Não poder jogar isto em mais lado nenhum, custa.
Why is this stuck on the Wii?
Yeah.
Punch-Out is a simple concept. You play as that one
Eu estou constantemente a fazer a mesma pergunta.
guy from Smash Brothers and you punch. It's boxing, except instead of being super realistic and filled with slow motion replays, we've got an incredibly cartoonish atmosphere that is filled with life. All of the characters are so animated, have a bunch of personality. It's like Street Fighter, but goofier and a little less. The NES original has you going stage to stage trying to find weaknesses while being shown static images of your opponents, but this time you get slideshows, you get statistics, some of which are really unfortunate. Bro, I had to give up after 2. Punch-Out Wii was actually outsourced and developed by Next Level Games, so you might recognize this the people who made Captain America Super Soldier and Luigi's Mansion 3. 2 incredibly different games, I know, but this is smack dab in the middle of their gamography and is, in my opinion, one of the best on that console. I'm usually not one for motion controls, especially from the Wii era where it was 50-50 if it'd work or not, but Punch-Out feels incredibly fluid. It's responsive. Imagining this on a Switch or Switch 2 with Joy-Cons or a better Switch 2 Joy-Cons sounds great. They could easily bring this over or even do a sequel, and I hope they do because Punch-Out for the Wii is a pretty dang good game stuck on an old console. Wait, the Wii's almost 20? Help. Speaking of the Wii and being portless, how about that Operation Rainfall? Like 2/3 of it. Anyone remember that? Back in 2011, a bunch of people got together and successfully spread the word about a few Wii JRPGs that had no localization plans. Fans wanted these 3 games, and boy, they were gonna make it happen. These were Xenoblade Chronicles, The Last Story, and Pandora's Tower. Everyone knows about Xenoblade these days, as it's become one of Nintendo's flagship franchises. The other 2, a little less so. Mostly because Nintendo didn't even do it themselves. The Last
Acho que o Last Story é muito cool, não é? Eu não joguei, mas...
Story was the last real Mistwalker game until Fantasian came out recently. This was, in my opinion, Final Fantasy series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi's final attempt to make another hugely popular RPG franchise that didn't quite pan out. A shame, because it's pretty solid. It's got this interesting and maybe lackluster combat system where you do damage by running into people, as they were trying to make it a little more action-oriented. The story's a bit generic and extremely British, a common thread in Operation Rainfall.
Now it's right time!
And absolutely a solid RPG and a console lacking them. I mean, what else do we got? Arcry's Fantasia?
You're hurt. Let me heal you with magic.
Yes, please. The Last Story is a pretty dope game that should get another chance on a non-Wii console. Lastly, for the Rainfall, we got Pandora's Tower. I don't really hear many people talk about Pandora's Tower, probably because it's considered the weakest of the bunch. It's sitting at a 73 on Metacritic, and despite Operation Rainfall's insistence, it didn't sell very well. I mean, both it and The Last Story had to be published by Xseed instead of Nintendo. I guess it doesn't help when a majority of the reviews from the time say things like, it'd be nice if the graphics were better, or the Wii has technical limitations. Like, yeah, duh. Pandora's Tower was originally published by Nintendo.
God damn it.
Nintendo and developed by Ganbarian, the people behind Jump Ultimate Stars, and a breadth of licensed anime games. In fact, this is one of their only releases not tied to some sort of anime, and I kinda wish we could have seen more. It's super unique. Climb the towers, save Elena from a messed up curse. Or not, that depends on your choices and how much time you waste. There's a bunch of endings. Alls I know, you gotta eat some meat with the grippers out. Yep, it does.
Huh?
feel a bit dated in that you're stuck to predetermined camera angles and combat is a little basic, but I love the implementation of the Wiimote. You do a lot of swinging and grapple hooking as you scale this bad boy. It's very narrative light for a majority of the experience, and I can see how that turned people off. Pandora's Tower is a very video game-ass video game, closer to a PlayStation 2 or GameCube action romp than what the cover may look like, and absolutely something I could see Nintendo being hesitant to localize. However, I still think it's pretty cool. It's dark, kinda creepy, has a minimum of storytelling, and I could see a little port, remaster, or enhanced version with less motion controls doing wonders. Heck, it's even got decent voice acting.
You're forbidden to eat meat, aren't you? Now this little morsel is beast flesh.
Pandora's Tower is cool, you should play it. But enough hipster nonsense, it's time for a heavy hitter. Nintendo needs to stop messing around and port some old GameCube classics. I'm talking 1080 Avalanche, I'm talking WarioWare Inc. Mega Party games, Fire Emblem Path of Radiance because it's still regularly over $200 boxed. Oh, also, Mario Kart Double Dash. No, I'm serious.
Yeah. Há muitos jogos da GameCube que eu acho muito interessantes. Porque nessa era, eles queriam fazer jogos, como é que eu ia dizer? Eles ainda não estavam preocupados com que toda a gente no mundo jogasse os jogos, e então ainda queriam fazer coisas assim mais criativas. E o Mario Kart Double Dash é um desses exemplos. Não há mais nenhum Mario Kart que implemente o conceito de ter dois characters no mesmo kart. Ainda não há. E nem vai haver. E isso é uma pena para mim.
I don't want to play Mario Kart 8. I want to play Mario Kart Double Dash. That was my favorite.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. Mario Kart Double Dash does something you barely see in racing games. It's co-op. It allows two people to race as one. The closest I've seen any game get to that is Team Sonic Racing, where you and two others work together to get to the front of the pack. That game is pretty decent, but Mario Kart Double Dash is the peak of that mountain. Maybe I'm not MK pilled enough, but I always saw Double Dash as the best in the series. It's got a fun soundtrack, it's got memorable courses, and the two-person karts made it really unique up against every other release in the series. Nintendo wasn't trying to make the next number entry, but instead try something different, and I think they succeeded.
Wait, por que não fazer o Double Dash 2?
Overall, I think Mario Kart 64 is probably a bit more memorable with the course selection and audiences, but there's something about DD that hooks me. It was also the first game I got to try GameCube LAN with, which blew me away as a teen. That was until Halo 2, a couple Xboxes, 3 folding tables, and a dozen liters of Mountain Dew came around, and probably ruined my life. It's cool that Nintendo wants to put a ton of tracks across the series into their newest game, but I would love if they acknowledged the GameCube more. One day I'll be able to play this or say The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Adventure again, just hopefully without the mess of wires required to do so. There's no category of video games where games become stuck more than the licensed ones, and usually that's okay. I don't think anyone out there is clamoring for a port of Fantastic Four Rise of Silver Surfer, which if you want to see me talk about, you can do it here. At the same time, I would love to be able to kick back on my couch, pick up a controller, press a few buttons, and be playing Bucky O'Hare. Bucky! Captain Bucky O'Hare! Mutants and aliens and toads beware! Aren't familiar? That's okay. I don't think many are.
What the fuck is this? Gostava de conhecer. Whoa. What the fuck are these graphics? The graphics. Wow.
In fact, considering his official wiki page features the cover of the video game instead of his comics or cartoon, Bucky O'Hare is distilled down to its core a kid's cartoon that failed to grab an audience. Which is crazy because the entire concept was conjured up by Michael Golden and Larry Hama, the latter of which responsible for a little indie project known as G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero. This cartoon, originally an 80s comic, had a bunch of furries coming down from space to hang out with some kid with activist parents or something.
Like making sure that when you grow up, there are whales and owls and an ozone layer. Oh, David, the rally. We've got to run.
There's a whole conflict between the United Animals Federation and the Toad Empire, who were described on their wiki page as consumerist, which is really funny considering this thing was a comic book, toy line, cartoon, and of course, video game. The show itself, it seems okay. They clearly wanted that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles audience.
Yep.
Bucky doesn't have much personality besides being a captain, and the show zips between a tiny child being bullied and a green rabbit shooting lasers in space. Well, after that initial 80s comic run, we got a single season, a toy line that was canceled after the first line, and because it was too late to cancel, 2 different video games. And who better to make a few games aping on the concept of anthropomorphic animal teams than Konami? You'd get a lot of licensed games thrown at developers and then probably into a wall here in the 80s and 90s. However, it was studios like Capcom and Konami that would take your IP and toss it into the quality stratosphere. Bucky O'Hare for both the Nintendo Entertainment System and
Bom editing. Gostei do detalhe.
arcade. Question: have you ever played The Simpsons arcade, X-Men, Sunset Riders, Turtles in Time? Well, you're looking at it just with a slightly more green aesthetic. I do think it's pretty cool that they got the original voice actors for some cutscenes.
Well, we managed to stop the climate converter.
Even if it looks a little off.
You saved us all, Willie.
This is, as you'd expect, a quarter-devouring beat-em-up where you run with the Anthro Squad, blasting toads and doing whatever
Olá, Maria, estás boa? Estou a olhar para a câmera. É awkward quando eu olho para a câmera. Boa noite. Tirei sangue. Se calhar devia tirar para... Como é que se diz? Tipo, dador de sangue? Maybe? Eu nunca fiz isso. Tiraram foi para o exame. Porquê? Porque... Para a semana vou ter consulta, então foi tipo... Então vou hoje fazer a tal colheita do sangue para ver como é que está o castrol. Estou sempre... Glicémias e... sei lá, não é? Não tenho dói-dói, foi fácil. Foi tão fácil que eu não senti nada. O gajo foi tipo, já acabou? O gajo para mim, já acabou? E eu tipo, sei lá. E depois eu tipo, quando é que eu tiro este penso? E ele, sei lá, podes tirar agora. Podes tirar daqui a 5 minutos. E eu, tá bem.
Bucky O'Hare does. However, I didn't actually know this one existed because I wanted to talk about the other one. Bucky O'Hare for the NES, spearheaded by Masato Maegawa.
Minha veia foi fácil. Foi tão fácil, mas 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 tão fácil. Agora não podes por causa do cancro, não é?
The guy who founded Treasure. Yeah, Gunstar Heroes, Ikaruga, Warrior World Treasure. Bucky O'Hare is pretty freaking good. If you don't mind dying a ton. As you can probably guess, given the people who put this together, Bucky O'Hare is a...
Eu acho que foi mais fácil do que da outra vez em que tinha mais 20 quilos. Também acho que deve ajudar.
A punishment platformer in the same vein as Mega Man. It is very easy to die and you're...
Justamente pelo tipo de cancro que é. Ok. Eu não sei sobre isso. Eu assumi que era isso, mas... Como é que era? Linfoma? Eu não sei, desculpa.
Going to a lot. However, it's actually built to be forgiving by giving you unlimited continues that'll start you back in the current act, which is usually the same screen. You will die, but you will have a good time. Except during the Blue Planet. That one's just mean. The Mega Man bit comes into play as you unlock new characters with different abilities, each of which can charge to do special things.
Ok. A pessoa recebe cancro. E a culpa é toda tua, já viste? Mas assim podes dizer que deste alguma coisa a alguém na vida.
Bucky can jump higher, the robot can jetpack for a bit, the duck can crawl on walls, and the cat has a movable laser bomb thing. All of these can become stronger by finding power-ups in the stages. Bucky's not the best.
Mas diz-me uma coisa, o que é que... Agora puseste-me a pensar, e eu não sei se isto é uma pergunta demasiado indiscreta, má, não sei. Mas qual é que é a atitude deles, portanto, em relação a sangue? Não podes doar sangue. E ter filhos? Podes ter, eles dizem que podes ter filhos. Sabes uma coisa? O pai da PT da minha mãe, o pai da PT da minha mãe também tem cancro, tem a mesma médica que eu. Estas árvores genealógicas, pá, fico todo confuso.
from Konami during this era, but it sure is a
Mas ok.
sleeper that I think holds up in several ways,
Mas
especially
eu
some of
acredito que
that music.
a tua mãe deve-te contar as historinhas todas, toda a gente que por onde passa, não é? Durante a noite toda. Eu estou a imaginar. Oh Maria, não saias daqui que eu vou-te contar tudo. Eu vou-te contar tudo. Maria, não saias daqui. Por que estás a ir à cozinha? Vou-te contar. Olha, sabias que o pai do PT... E agarra-te o braço mesmo. Onde é que vais? Vou buscar bolachas, mãe.
What, you
Oh mãe, vou buscar bolachas, deixa-me.
expected different
Ela.
from freaking
Ah, ok. Então se vais voltar...
90s Konami? Get real. Unfortunately, both this and the arcade port are stuck back on platforms nearly 30 years old, and that's a massive shame. However, Konami's kind of become the poster child of supporting older games lately with collections regardless of them being licensed IPs or not, so, you know, manifesting some sort of Konami NES era and or arcade collection. That way we can finally have a modern way to play Aliens, The Simpsons, X-Men, Cowboys of Moo Mesa, G.I. Joe, Sunset Riders, all the Tiny Toon Adventures games,
Oh,
roller
Tiny
games,
Toon.
and, while I'm at it, totally unrelated, every single Ganbare Goemon game.
Depende do tipo de cancro. Para o cancro que eu tive, o principal fator de risco é ter alguém na família. Mas tanto quanto sei, eu não tinha ninguém. Estás a dizer que se houver alguém na família que tinha, então eles dizem, olha, é melhor não teres, mas como não tens, é na boa? Não é na boa, é que, tipo, tu vais fazer, tu fazes o que quiseres, não é? Não é? Tipo, se quiseres uma pílula na pajeja, não é o médico que vai dizer que não, digo eu. É daquelas merdas que vão acontecer anyway.
Surely that's not too much to ask for.
Sound great.
Shifting gears a bit, but keeping things licensed a bit longer, I've brought up the next thing probably 100 times, but I've never talked about them at length. Developed by High Moon Studios prior to the dreaded Call of Duty mines, if you haven't played Transformers War for Cybertron, you gotta find a way. And
I have this game. I should install this game. Eu estou a dizer que acho que eu ter filhos é um bocado mais cagativo do que aqueles cancros da mama que passam geração em geração. Tipo joia de família. Pois é, eu realmente não percebi essa frase, mas acho que agora as outras eram muito confusas para mim, não sei o que é que queria dizer. Mas cheira-me que agora já clarificaste.
there was before it got delisted. What are we doing? Transformers War for Cybertron and its sequel Fall of Cybertron aren't just good licensed games, they're fantastic releases that were totally overlooked.
Tenho tanta pena, já não posso jogar em co-op este jogo com ninguém. Desculpa, isto tu não queres saber disto, mas na minha library este jogo é bem fixe, mas era fixe era jogar com alguém. Eu acho que ainda posso jogar com o Pedro. Tem uma colega no trabalho que a avó teve cancro da mama, a mãe teve cancro da mama, a mãe já faleceu e ela não vai ao médico. Bem, olha, pelo menos se calhar não tinha filhos, digo eu. Não vai ao médico porque tem medo?
Heck, the sequel
Como é que está a
allegedly
ser?
only sold
Hold on. Como é que está a ser o teu domingo? Vou continuar.
105,000 copies in its first month, which is depressing. Transformers needs no introduction. Despite being Japanese in origin, you either know it as an extremely
Como é
American
que é possível? O jogo não vendeu, mas eu comprei-o. Quando eu compro uma coisa, geralmente toda a gente comprou. Não. Ei, pera, é mentira. Há tanta coisa que só eu joguei.
80s cartoon or an
A
extremely
brasileira não conseguiu
American
médico de
Michael Bay
família.
blow off your
Mas não
face.
consegues médicos aleatórios? Eu acho que a consulta que eu marquei nem sequer é com o médico de família. Eu queria que fosse, mas olha, foda-se. Espero que não seja. Eu acho que vai ser outra vez o mesmo gajo, meu. Oh não. Oh não.
Live-action film series starring the likes of Shia LaBeouf and Linkin Park. But you should think of these. War for Cybertron is...
É mau? Eu contei-te. Eu
was
não gostei nada da cena dele, meu. Da atitude dele. Não sei explicar. Mas pronto, vou sempre ser cordial. Vou sempre ser cordial. É só isso. Cordialidade acima de tudo.
Is a fully co-op third-person shooter
Man, eu tenho que fazer stream deste
a long
jogo.
story as both Autobots and Decepticons.
Que é fixe,
You start as the bad
ninguém tem este jogo. Já foi descontinuado. Era cool. É Transformers. Hoje que dia é? Quinta? Domingo vou ver um filme dos Transformers. Se calhar jogava no sábado. E dizia assim, pessoal, como é que é, meus putos?
baddies getting your evil plan together before then switching to the Autobots to defend against that assault. It's actually a super interesting concept as it had you play both sides of the conflict with some friends. I'm using past tense now because this entire experience is gone and you can't play online anymore, so that's cool. The style,
So
as you can
sad.
see, is a bit darker. It treads a line between the goofy, bright cartoony skins and the crazy, over-designed mess of metal from the Michael Bay film.
O meu telemóvel está reparado. Olha, por falar nisso, epá, isto é um bocado. É bué da rada. Vou contar uma história bué da rada. Hoje estava tipo a pagar a internet. E eu, epá, deixa ver os pontos que eu tenho. E então comprei um telemóvel. Já estou a precisar, também já estava a precisar há um mês ou mais. Sei lá quantas chamadas é que eu já perdi neste telemóvel. Eu fui ver os preços mais ou menos nos sítios. Acho que este telemóvel parece decente. Está mais barato noutros sítios com estes pontos. Que se foda. Foi um bocado assim, que se foda. Eu não quero estar a olhar mais do que 5 segundos para comprar um telemóvel novo, vou ser honesto. Por outro lado, este já durou 6 anos. Quando o próximo durar tipo 1 ano, vou chorar, não é? Vai ser lindo. Whatever. Mas pronto, olha, tendo um telemóvel. Se alguma vez precisarem, whatever, este funciona ainda, não é?
I myself love the Daniel Warren Johnson comic book treatment,
Pode não funcionar da melhor maneira, mas funciona.
where they're pulling out rainmakers and drawing a mid-transformation. Look at this freak. Speaking of mid-transformation, I think they forgot to put Bumblebee's arm in this game.
Tem que fazer
You
aquela
okay,
coisa de
buddy?
transferir.
With Born, Fall of Cybertron, however, this
Deve ser aquela
darker
coisa de
look
transferir.
brings it-
Alguma vez fizeste isso, Maria? Tu que estás sempre a usar telemóveis diferentes. Aquela coisa de transferir as contas e tal. Eu quero fazer isso para não ter muito trabalho. Até por causa de coisas tipo MBWay e não sei o quê. Só saber isso entre Samsungs. Tem que ser da mesma marca? Por acaso, olha, por acaso que eu comprei da mesma marca. Eu pensava que mesmo que não fosse, que dava.
And the only
Que
real
cena.
negative I have about this, and that it kind of looks the same for 80% of the time. The colors are very muted, even from the concept art and the character selection. It's a lot of dark hallways with vague features.
Essa é a parte triste deste jogo. É que é da geração da PS3 que, por alguma razão, vejo toda a gente a ter. Conheço uma expressão chamada Rose Tinted Glasses. Eu vejo o pessoal todo tipo, pá, esta console foi altamente. Mas depois os jogos eram todos castanhos ou pretos, pessoal. E corriam muito mal. Tipo, corriam tipo performance. Algumas coisas associadas ao game devem dar. Olha, e como é que é do MBWay? MBWay! Eu tinha ideia que aquilo está associado a um telemóvel? Não. Ou é um número? Eu não sei.
Tech machines. It is Cybertron after all. I'm not expecting the
Oh, no,
scenery of like Visions of Mana.
E a
or
outra cena,
anything,
a
but
cena
it
do
does get a little
banco.
repetitive to look
Eu por
at.
acaso não uso muito, tipo para pagar coisas nem nada, por acaso não instalo muito. Seja como for, já me esqueci. O meu número. Eu acho que tenho uma passe. Epá, não sei.
After 6 or 10
Deve dar para
hours, but you
transferir.
know it doesn't. Blasting, double jumping, transforming, and murder crushing your way through thousands of Decepticons
Isso é tão
and
cool.
or Autobots.
Sorry, desculpa
Playing this
estarem
co-op campaign
este
when it
vídeo.
came out was an absolute treat. It's quick,
Yeah, é
snappy,
muito
the
cool.
shooting feels good, and all the weapons have a
Eu joguei na
distinct
altura e
kick
foi
to
bem
'em.
fixe.
The zoom-in pistols have good feel, special abilities are great. Throwing your car into first gear and ripping around corners while blasting dudes is exciting. I was just playing Space Marine 2 right before recording this for this video, and it just reminded me of how fun this era of video games really was. You didn't need a lot of big RPG mechanics. You don't need to rope me in for 200 hours and 3 years of season passes. I just want a solid co-op shooter campaign taking place in a thing that I like that'll run me 2 to 3 playthroughs, and I'm set. The sequel, Fall of Cybertron, doesn't have a co-op campaign, which is a shame, but instead a fun multiplayer mode where you get to make your own Transformer.
Cool.
I played this thing a ton when it came out, and it really showed that
Este não tenho, infelizmente, só tenho War.
back then, licensed games could be awesome. It was a standout in the middle of the Sega MCU era
Yeah,
where these
tenho mesmo
things
que jogar
were awful. They were standouts
War.
in High Moon's career. Heck, the sequel even got re-released on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One before then being removed from all digital store shelves back in 2018, a mere 2 years of it existing. But with Activision stepping away from licensed games in 2020, all the servers were taken offline, so both of these experiences are now shells of what they used to be. Insert joke about the first Transformers movie. Thankfully, you can mod the PC release to play online if you have it on Steam already, but it is an
Transformers Re-Energized? Que é isso? Hã? Ah, é para poder jogar o War for Cybertron? Ah. Para poder jogar com os meus amigos? This madman actually did it. O que é Rotted? Não importa porque este deve ser o que eu tenho. War for Cybertron. Se quer saber uma curiosidade, sim, claro que sim. Conta.
absolute shame that both of these are in the state they're in. There's been a whole thing about whether or not they can come back, with the game rumored to have been lost, to then briefly appearing on the Xbox digital store, so hopefully one day these can come back and be properly preserved. The Cybertron High Moon duology deserves your time, and currently you can only really give it a shot through.
A Ana, uma das namoradas da Sarah, vai para Flup fazer filosofia. Isso é bom para depois ir para política ou assim, não é? Ou para escrever livros, se alguém quiser comprar.
Illicit means or a used physical copy, or a
Pensem sempre no output das coisas. Desculpa, eu vou continuar a ver o vídeo. Desculpa, Maria.
digital key that cost way too much.
Why?
But even then, that old experience just isn't there. Microsoft, if you do one thing with Activision, make it this.
Developers.
If they do come back though, y'all gotta help it sell more than 100K. How does this happen in the 2010s at
Trabalho
the
em
height of
marketing.
those movies' popularity?
Enriquecimento pessoal soa muito bem. That's cool.
You know what I like? Cars, specifically video game cars. You don't typically see video games with them make their way to another generation. It could be for any reason too, like licensed music, car IPs, the studio not existing anymore, or just being kind of outdated. I don't think many people are clamoring to play Project God.
Como já deve ser reparado, o meu enriquecimento pessoal tem sido sacar livros e ler, não é? Eu digo isto como se fosse mau, mas é para o que dá.
Gotham Racing
Comprar! Ok, não dá para comprar sequer. Faz sentido, tipo Cool Aunties? Ok.
1, but they might be asking about Burnout 3 Takedown. I know I am.
É isso, Maria. Procura pessoas que te admirem e junta-te a elas. É isso. E caga nas que são merda. Tipo eu. Burnout é cool.
Criterion's Burnout 3 Takedown is still one of, if
Takedown.
not the best arcade racer of all time. Paradise is cool and all, but Takedown, that's where it's at. If you're younger and you have no idea what a Burnout is, I guess I understand, because the last real entry was in 2008, because no one cares about Burnout Crash, so I guess we should explain. Burnout is a racing game where you put just as much effort into
Provavelmente nunca mais te convidam.
causing destruction as you do the race. You go.
Não, mas também, olha, vamos pensar juntos. Vai ajudar em que elas ficarem zangadas? Não é? E elas também já sabem disso, tipo, não ajuda em nada, não faz nada. É tipo, aconteceu, já passou. Já está feito. Agora, olha, é limpar o tapete ou comprar outro, whatever.
Fast, you do big crash, and watch a crazy amount of particle damage fly around. The leap from Burnout 2 to 3, even just on the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, was nuts. Everything was shiny, the models had so many breaking points. It was always fun to watch things happen in slow motion, and best of all, the racing was good. It said nah to any kind of racing sim.
Convidar, mas tu já foste? E se tu fores lá, vais fazer o quê? Sabes o que eu vou fazer? O que é que vais fazer?
Like Gran Turismo and went full-on cruising USA, which was a perfect decision. There's tons of locales to visit, levels with branching paths, and your first time doing a lap through any stage feels like a fight for survival. The big thing I loved as a teenager, which led to tons of rentals, was the crash mode. You do a little puzzle-style thing with your vehicle and attempt to cause the most destruction possible.
Isto era mesmo fixe no Burnout. Eu lembro-me de adorar o Burnout porque eu gostava de jogos de corrida, mas depois cheguei a um ponto e pensei, tem que ser só corridas? E então este é como ele acabou de descrever, era uma espécie de puzzle game onde tu tentas criar um cenário onde crias o máximo de destruição. Isso era mesmo engraçado, especialmente para um puto como eu. Queres fazer um chá? Eu já fiz e estou a beber. Como é que é? Bebam chá, pessoal. Se não beberem água, bebam chá.
With a numerical dollar attached to it. Something often replicated but never fully eclipsed. Like with Pain. Oh, Pain, you tried. I imagine one of the main things holding them back from re-releasing old games like this is the inclusion of licensed music.
Yeah.
The track list, though. We got Franz Ferdinand, Jimmy Eat World, Rise Against, Yellow Card, and even the debut of I'm Not Okay by My Chemical Romance nearly 3 weeks before it hit radio. What? Oh, and don't forget DJ Striker.
Alright, isso é insane. Videojogos no início dos 2000 com licensing eram incríveis. Não envelhece bem porque depois não conseguem dar re-release aos jogos, mas olha. Ou então os re-releases saem horríveis, tipo San Andreas ou até o próprio Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2. Epá, eu não quero dizer que as músicas sejam más, mas é só a cena de não serem as mesmas. Tipo, pai, que metade da banda sonora é coisas que eles foi tipo, epá, tivemos que tirar muito disto. Isso é triste.
Gee, thanks for the helpful hints there. These days, Criterion Games does whatever EA wants them to do, it seems. EA brought them on for a few Need for Speeds and Battlefields, but they haven't got a full swing at the premier arcade racer for over 15 years now. They recently put out Need for Speed Unbound, which shares a bit in common, but it never really fully reaches that final gear. I would love if EA would stop being cowards and port some of their old racing games. Burnout 3 Takedown deserves it.
Tão cool.
Have you ever picked up a totally random game, something maybe completely out of your wheelhouse, in an attempt to find, you know, like a new interest? Well, if not, I highly recommend it. I really like racing games. I don't really know where that came from either. You just never know when something's gonna click. That's how I got started painting miniatures lately for Marvel Crisis Protocol. Baby's first 40K, it's a lot of fun. J-Dog, let's play again. Now, on the same side as the EA coin, how's about something like Need for Speed Underground 2 as well? I mean, look, Need for Speed is great. It's been around since I was a kid. I remember playing Hot Pursuit on my friend's dad's computer and thinking we were the coolest guys around. Hot Pursuit 2 was also great. Need for Speed treads a line in between your Burnouts and Gran Turismo, where it gives you more of a lighthearted, fast-paced experience without going full simulation, and that's a big sweet spot for me. It's why I love Forza Horizon. Need for Speed Underground 2, to me, was perfect. It featured this big open world. Come and listen to the idiot! Hey everybody, the idiot's not just neon lights.
Hey, obrigado pelo follow. Thank you for the follow.
And a goofy story. This is one of those games that everyone had, and I mean that literally. Apparently it sold over 11 million copies worldwide, which also means it outsold every single game on the GameCube. People do be loving Need for Speed, which makes it...
Ok, isso faz sentido. Eu lembro-me toda a gente a jogar esta merda, pessoal em portáteis na escola a jogar esta merda.
Even more of a shame that they can't seem to replicate this success. Need for Speed has had a time since then, and their underground-inspired sequels always fail to hit. Instead, we're getting weird campaigns inspired by Fast and the Furious with QuickTime events. Need for Speed The Run was weird.
Yeah.
Props to them for at least trying new ideas with the series, but honestly, just bring back Underground 2. Just throw it on the PS5 or Switch, don't even gotta improve it much. That game rules, and we all deserve to play it again. Now, how about car video games without...
Destruction Derby? Destruction Derby era cool. Quem é que jogou isto?
Racing, the dreaded genre that's practically died out, vehicle combat games, your Twisted Metals, Star Wars Demolitions, Cell Damages. Only half of those are even good, but I sure love me some Vigilante 8 Second Offense.
Nunca joguei.
Twisted Metal clone? Maybe, but a fun one. Activision and Luxoflux, the people behind... okay, yeah, that's kind of unfortunate, decided that they were gonna do the vehicle combat thing, and do what they did. Vigilante 8 is the goofy cousin to Twisted Metal. You get two paths in the vehicle combat genre, one dark and edgy, and the other this. It plays out how you'd think. You trek through different biomes,
Some DeLorean?
a lot of which are homages to 70s action and exploitation films. It's wacky, over the top, and the physics on the cars reflect that. You want to bounce around? Too bad, you don't get a choice. You can also get power-ups to change how your vehicles function, like Diddy Kong Racing, propellers to float on water, skis so you can move around on snow, or even just flying around. Just watch out for the two-frame gator attack. Vigilante 8 Second Offense, like its predecessor, doesn't take itself very seriously, and that's to its credit. It's shameless in what it is, a clone of another popular game from the time, has built-in cheats, split-screen multiplayer, and everything you'd want from one of these. Just with garbage men who reveal themselves to be aliens. Yeah, look at this guy. Weirdly, this would be all for Vigilante 8 as a franchise until 2008, when I got an Xbox 360 exclusive thing called Vigilante 8 Arcade. It wasn't a remake or a remaster, it was a whole different project, and it just failed to hit those same highs. Is it because in 2008, car combat is practically a dead genre? Maybe. But also, Activision should bring these games to modern platforms so more people can experience them. I mean, look, I just read right now that Skygunner's hitting the PlayStation Store. Anything can happen. Dreams can become real. Vigilante 8 is pretty weird and wacky, there's no doubt about that, but we can get a whole lot weirder. Whip out that Nintendo 64 and let's head on over to the space station Silicon Valley. This thing is bizarre.
Olá Oliveira, estás bom?
What? I have a hard time describing Space Station Silicon Valley, but let's give it a shot. What happens when you give the future developers of Grand Theft Auto, DMA Design, the mission to create an N64 platformer and probably a bag of crack?
Estou-me a sentir
Space
seco.
Station Silicon.
Deixa-me pensar. Eu bebi água, acho que vi 3 garrafas de água que têm 0,8 litros. Ou seja, isso dá-me quanto? 2,4 litros. Estou a beber este chá e a minha caneca eu sei que é 0,5 litros. Daria um total de 2,9 litros. Num dia, acho que não é mau.
Valley, a game where you play as a microchip possessing animals who may or may not be dead to do platforming. We follow a robot, Evo, that's you, and Dan Danger as you're sent on a mission to do something. It's an incredibly vague setup, but one that leads to the theme park of platforming levels with different puzzle challenges, or spending 15 minutes looking at walkthroughs because it can be a little obfuscated. Space Station Silicon Valley is incredibly British, both in design and humor. It also ends up being one of the more unique games from this era with the robot animal switching. You can be a dog, a sheep, a husky, even penguins. Except, we're gonna be strapping wheels and rockets to them. Alter that DNA, mouse got wheels. Turtles are becoming tanks, and the walrus, well, he's got a pair of sunglasses. Look, I'm just saying that's pretty cool. Yeah, same. So we're necromancing animals with microchips and collecting power cells in order to move to more stages. Some animals play better than others, some stages have a lot more gusto than others, but it's absolutely a cult classic from a time where you would be getting these every other week. But rather than leaning into the sassy mascot, it just decides to be goofy, lets you play as all sorts of animals and give you a few chuckles from the in-between moments. I love that emulation's letting us see those far LOD models on enemies, like this fox. It's literally a rectangle. Yo, what's good? Space Station Silicon Valley is great. It was highly reviewed at launch and sold like absolute crap, so unfortunately it's stuck on the Nintendo 64 and technically the PlayStation 1. There's a PS1 port that came out a few years later by a developer called Runecraft that was retitled Evo's Space Adventures and only released in Europe. How do I say this? They it up big time. It's barely recognizable. The camera angles are completely different, so you can't see the full stages, and I am unsure of how you change a game fundamentally this much. They quite literally took a well-loved cult classic and bodied it into an unrecognizable state. So much so that you can't even see how many collectibles you've gotten on whatever stage you're in a collect-a-thon. How do you mess that up? Regardless, the original Space Station Silicon Valley is a good time and is worth a shot. I don't think we'll be seeing it ported anytime soon, considering its initial bomb and the fact that Rockstar seems a bit preoccupied these days. But hey, maybe we can get them to swing this and say Body Harvest at the same time for the 15 people, including me, who will pop off over it. Who's with me? There's earnestly a ton of weird games that I would love to see make it out of the old console dimension. Maybe that's because I grew up playing Sega and PlayStation, and we would always rent games, and the most popular stuff was always checked out. So instead of, say, Banjo-Kazooie, which was always checked out, we would have to pick up something like Mischief Makers. And for real, where the hell is Mischief Makers? Say hello again, Treasure. It's time for one of your strangest games to date. I cannot believe that Mischief Makers never made its way to the Wii Virtual Console or even a port anywhere. It's one of the only true Nintendo 64 exclusives out there, and it's an absolute blast to play. But
Nunca
I
ouvi
guess it makes
falar.
sense considering
Por isso que eu gosto deste canal, não é? What the?
it's technically NX and not Nintendo. Look, I like me a quick game. I don't need something to be 10 to 20 hours long. Sometimes I want a game I can sit down with and beat in an afternoon, maybe two. Some of my favorites of all time are Rocket Knight Adventures, Streets of Rage 2, Super...
Eu tenho que concordar plenamente com ele. Temos que parar com este discurso de um jogo só vale a pena a partir das 57 horas.
Mario World, give me a weird gimmick, a memorable setting, and something I can replay without any hassle. Mischief Makers is exactly that. You take control of Marina Lightyears, a small robot maid with big punchin' fists. Then you gotta go save your creator, the slimy Professor Theo, by running through 2.5D platforming stages in what plays like a villain of the week type of deal. It's also, as a bonus, one of 2 games that let me hold the Nintendo 64 controller like a normal human being would.
Yay.
This and Tetrasphere. D-pad, let's go. What even are the other games? I can't remember. So the whole shtick is this. Marina can grab and throw and jump. She can hold on to things, shake it, and can yeet it at enemies. The controls can be a bit of a pain to get used to because you need to utilize double taps or the C buttons in order to boost, and sometimes a lot of precision's needed. But it's worth getting used to because of how fun this one is. The story's like a full 90s comedy anime. You're fighting furry,
Man, vê a porra era isto?
squads, you've got goofy, massive-eyed anime characters, and there's even a random athletics contest midway through.
Tô
There's
pensando
tons of
naquela que
variety
viste.
that kicks into as you're suddenly riding an ostrich or engaging in the very typical treasure-style boss fights. Just make sure to give them a little. Reviews from the time were pretty unfair to Mischief Makers. In the late 90s,
Mischief Makers. Super Mario. Deixa-me só esconder isto. Tenho medo que apareça porno. Ah, não pode-se ver. Ok. Portanto, onde é que está? Ok. Mischief. Eu nem sei. Para jogar isto deve ser uma linda merda. Pois é, no 64 é uma merda para ser emulado.
we were pushing 3D, 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 so anything not pushing that envelope was looked at lesser than. This thing was getting 6 out of 10s, which I thought was crazy. This was Treasure doing their thing in the only way that they knew how. Although they did lean a bit more into exploration with levels and using Clancer faces on everything to do platforming, or you know, doing basic math. Whew, almost failed. I love Mischief Makers, but unfortunately, both Treasure and Enix never came back to it. They did make Marina playable in Arakugaki Showtime, but that's about it. This is probably the most underrated Nintendo 64 game out there. I don't hear people yapping off about it, and if Square Enix decides to make a collection of their classic titles, this needs to be on there.
Nunca te perdoarei.
Screw the RPGs, Illusion of Gaia, whatever. We as a society need a little shake. There's endless weird games from the 90s and 2000s that are stuck on older consoles. Stuff I really like too. Astal is one of those early Sega Saturn platforms.
O que é que achas, Maria? Imagina, estou a ver estes vídeos. Eu gosto muito destes vídeos porque são nostálgicos, kinda. São ir buscar coisas, tipo jogos que eu não conheço também dos 90s e assim. Falar deles, descrevê-los um bocado e é tipo, olha, perdeste este. O que é que tu achas disso? Não é fixe? Se calhar curtiste uma cena igual para livros, não? Para ti.
Platformers that was really showcasing what 32 bits could do with 2D visuals, and it's gorgeous. In fact, the whole Sega Saturn is filled with games that have yet to be recognized outside of the year 1996. The fact that Panzer Dragoon Saga is just sitting there for decades while being notoriously one of the rarest and most sought after games is wild. Mysteria is a pretty cool underrated JRPG. Dragon Force is freaking Dragon Force. The Japanese exclusive Princess Crown was
Isto é a minha tentativa de Dragon Force. Fucking shitty band, I hate that band.
the precursor to what we see with Vanillaware nowadays, and Super Tempo is the follow-up
Mas se calhar há em livros, não?
to one of the strangest 32X releases out there.
Também a diferença é que tu com os jogos consegues mostrar gameplay, não é? Com livros é chato, tem que ser uma coisa mais vlog, tem que estar, a pessoa tem que, se calhar, tem que ser mais bonita, não sei. Mas eu acho que dá, pode funcionar. A pessoa está tipo com o livro na mão. Vocês nunca viram, não é? Consegue ser carismático na mesma. É, olha aqui, eu tenho aqui este livro, mesmo fixe, nunca ninguém leu, nunca não sei o quê e tal, e coisa e tal, não? É sobre isto, sobre aquilo.
But it's all stuff that deserves
Não
to
bate
make a
igual.
comeback. And that's just on the Saturn. Outside that, we got the Beautiful Joe series, one of Capcom's most notorious franchises from the PlayStation 2 and GameCube era that's been left in the dust. Nintendo's got a ton of other series too, like the other Excite games, like Truck. Yeah, remember Excitebot's Trick Racing? No? You should.
What?
There's a lot of smaller games like this out there, and we'll get to them one day. But for now, I've only got one more I want to talk about, and you've been hearing it for years. It's something that I've considered making a full video on for years, but I wasn't really sure if it made sense. Mostly because it's extremely archaic by today or even
Tô a sentir,
yesterday's standards, but
Estou a sentir os meus lábios secos, acho eu. Agora vou ficar a pensar nisto.
Screw it, let's do it anyway. The Dreamcast just turned 25
Dreamcast!
days ago from writing this, and I
Este era o momento para a Thelma vir, mas ela disse-me que está a fazer outras cenas.
didn't have anything prepared, so I think you know it's
Phantasy
coming.
Star
One of my favorite
Online.
video games of all time is
Batom de cieiro. Deixa-me rir que amanhã tenho cieiro. Não tenho.
Phantasy Star Online, and it is an absolute
Nesta...
shame
Oh,
that
Maria,
Sega
Maria, já estiveste nesta casa? Esta casa não tem nada. É casa de gajo. Não há nada. Não há cremes, não há o caralho. Tem aquele Nivea que já acabou para aí há 2 semanas, mas a caixa ainda está lá.
hasn't done anything with it. Fantasy Star Online,
Casa de
PSO,
gajo.
a game incredibly ahead of its time and probably one of the first MMOs
Eu nem esqueci como é que tenho mobília. Ah, foi porque o meu pai quis me dar, senão não tinha.
out there for a lot
Era só computador no chão, não é? Computador no chão, eu sentado no chão a jogar com... Não, era só isso. Casa de gajo.
of people, probably because it literally was
Vou-te
the
levar
first
care
console
package. Ok, obrigado.
MMORPG. The Dreamcast sure was in the future. They were advertising full
Necessaire.
broadband net play on this thing. In '99, you could hook up to the net, potentially hog phone lines, and play several video games online on one of the loudest consoles of all time. Seriously, I always think these things
Grau de cerveja virado ao contrário para o sofá. Mesmo?
are gonna break. I recently got a modded Dreamcast, so I can play
Oh.
this and whatever I want on my HD TV. So there's that, but there's nothing
Oh.
quite like playing this online back in the day. To distill this down all the way, Phantasy Star Online was Sega and Sonic Team's attempt to turn their Final Fantasy equivalent into a big online game. Something that
That's
hadn't
cool.
really been done before. You could connect with others from your Dreamcast
Falta 2 pessoas aqui, a Ares e o Suto. Essas 2 pessoas adoram Phantasy Star.
online into different lobbies and go a dungeon crawling. The basis of
E
the
acho que é
story
mesmo,
is simple.
no caso da Ares, é mesmo este que ela gosta. Acho eu.
Almost
O antigo.
inconsequential due to its scale. You are a space colonist aboard the spaceship Pioneer 2. The planet you're gonna take, Ragol, is filled with all sorts of nonsense and enemies, and it's up for you to fix that. Eventually, Dark Faults appears and is like, people are bad, yada yada. You beat the bad guys, and space is no longer the final frontier. 95% of the characters are other people you play with, and they're all created characters with no personality beyond spamming messages and chat, but that's not why we played this. We played this because it was a
Let's
way to
go.
go on an adventure with friends from in front of your couch. MMORPGs were mostly a PC
Olha, com a inflação, ainda faz sentido haver moedas de 1 cêntimo e de 2 cêntimos e de 5 cêntimos.
affair, and kinda still are. So this really hit a sweet spot for me and a bunch of people I've talked to.
You can even build a common front in real time with players
Estou
on the other
genuinamente a
side of the
perguntar.
earth, 20,000 kilometers away.
I love this early commercial implying that 6 billion people were playing. Yeah, marketing. The aesthetic was that futuristic space fantasy that only Phantasy Star and the Genesis had. The music was dynamic in each zone and incredibly good. I can still hear the lobby themes playing in my head to
Houve uma altura que eu guardava moedas de 1 euro numa coisinha. E depois vim para aqui morar e essa coisinha, em vez de meter moedas de 1 euro, tirava. Porquê? Para lavar a roupa. Passado 2 anos desapareceu. Eu nunca soube que aquelas moedas que eu estava a amealhar, nunca soube que ia ser esse o destino. Ia ser lavar a roupa.
this day. However, and the big asterisk here, being an online MMO released in the year 2000, I'm sure you can imagine how the combat goes.
Alright.
A vida dá voltas, tal como a roupa na máquina, não é?
Sick.
Yeah, it's minimalist to say the least. Phantasy Star Online isn't going to be winning any awards for gripping gameplay, but I took that 3-hit combo and 6-button hotbar and ran with it for hundreds of hours. It's not particularly long. All of the episodes can be beaten in a few days, and that'll just leave you upping the difficulty and grinding out levels till like 200. The endgame is just more of the same, and playing it for the first time today might actually be a bit jarring. But there really was nothing else quite like Phantasy Star Online. Like,
Oh, isto era insane.
Actually, Phantasy Star Universe and PSO2 aren't even close. They pull a lot more from modern MMOs, especially the free-to-play PSO2, and it's crazy how much I'd rather play the original. Only hating a little bit. Thankfully, the PC version of this game, Burst, has a dedicated group of people running different private servers, so it's totally playable on modern hardware via workarounds.
Yay!
I sure would love it if Sega acknowledged the actual game. I don't know if there's enough of an audience to make it happen on modern consoles, but a modern HD port with a couple of polished odds and ends would be something I would absolutely replay. Some of the private servers regularly have several hundred people playing it, so it's not like it's totally dead. But that's the thing with the concept of online-only games. Once they're gone, they're gone. A copy of PSO for the Dreamcast or GameCube will run you $30 to $70 depending on the platform, and the split screen is absolutely worth a shot with some friends. There's really nothing like Phantasy Star Online out there, with its bizarre, janky, early 2000s
Quando ele disse bazar, pensei que ele ia dizer bazookas. Sabe, já estou a ficar distraído.
and for the people who were there, you know it too. Is Phantasy Star Online worth playing? I'm not sure. I grew up with the NES and Genesis, so I'm crusty as hell. But if you want to go back, or maybe for the first time, go and experience a world unlike any other, it is absolutely worth it. Sega, please.
Pensei que ia estou desiludido contigo.
Please listen. I don't want PSO2.
Phantasy Star Online. The gaming revolution comes in the year 2000.
In the year 2000.
Door to the future.
Olha, por que a
Door
bichinha está a
to
dormir?
freedom.
So there you have it, another batch of good
A
videos.
bichinha decidiu ir para o sofá e pôr-se a cabeça em cima do cenas que segura o braço direito e está a dormir, mas está mesmo olhos fechados.
Game stuck on old
Tadinha.
consoles.
Tão
It's
bonita.
getting kind of hard for me to accept that the Dreamcast is 20
Acabei de descobrir que tenho duas cópias do mesmo livro não intencional. É o que eu digo. Ontem estava a dizer e hoje volto a dizer. Para mim, o ideal é encontrar livros perfeitos e ideais e amazing e que ajudam a humanidade e só comprar esses. E esses ficarem tipo forever na minha estante. Nunca revender. Porque o valor deles é intemporal. E se alguém disser: "Ei, eu não sei nada sobre isso", e tu: hold on. Aqui na minha prateleira tem aqui uma coisa que vais precisar. E saco, vá, não te esqueças de devolver.
25
That's how
years
it's okay.
old, but I guess this is how it is. Getting old and realizing that the new childhood is Roblox and the free-to-play flavor of the month. If you like today's video, check out the sponsor, Ray Neo. It'll help the channel out a ton. Or if you'd like to support us directly, you can head on over to the Patreon and become a backer. With that, you'll also gain access to the Patreon Discord, where I frequently remind people that I am not a Nintendo kid. Mario's fine, I guess. Sonic, though.
Claro, de volta, sim, porque a maneira como eu quereria funcionar era arranjar coisas que eu acho incríveis que me constroem a mim, não é? Livros incríveis que me constroem a mim, e depois a funcionar como biblioteca. Toma aqui, não é? Toma aqui, torna-te uma pessoa incrível e agora devolve.
Oh yeah. You can also buy a t-shirt over at the Pixel Empire, toss us a subscription, a comment, or
Naifadas sempre penso nos livros que a outra puta me gamou. Provavelmente os livros não valiam nada, deixa lá. Estou a brincar. Não me lembro dessa história, por acaso. Não me lembro disso. Mas olha, like, faça um like, subscribe. Gosto muito do Austin Eruptin. E é isso.